Welcome back to the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and it's going to be a lot of good talk today. We got basketball, we have hockey coming up, but first we want to get to the news. News broke out of Chicago, and I guess you could say journeyman cornerback Buster Skrine. A lot of people, including Swig himself, said I discredited Thaddeus Young when I called him a journeyman, but I think Buster Skrine owns that title well. Obviously a cap cut here with Buster Skrine going. What's your thoughts on that news?
I'm not surprised, man. I mean, first of all, thank you for welcoming me in. I'm doing fine, by the way. We're talking about the Bears quickly here. Well, last week's episode, when we did the big free agency breakdown, we definitely talked about the Bears are going to start to make some moves to cut some players, restructure some contracts to create a little bit more wiggle room under the salary cap. And Buster Skrine was the first casualty. Cutting him frees up just under $5 million in cap space for the Bears. I expect it to be the first of several cost-cutting moves to give the Bears a little bit more flexibility. I do think Skrine is more appropriate to give that journeyman title to. I think that's fair. I mean, we're talking about a New York Jets legend here, of course. But one other thing with the Bears I thought was interesting is that they hired a former Texas head coach, Tom Herman, to be an offensive assistant or analyst on their staff. And I think that's interesting. We've seen some college coaches who don't work out come to the NFL in lesser roles. I mean, we'll see how Herman, if he has any impact, but he was the most disappointing head coach at Texas since Charlie Strong. Oh, wait, that was only 2 years. Still,
Yeah. Obviously, Tom Herman, that's big news. Anytime you get a name like that to come to your organization, it doesn't hurt. I think any offense to the Bears is good offense, no matter how many heads are combining there. But another news thing right here coming from a Chicago, New York player similar to Buster Skrine. This time it is Joakim Noah. He is going to be retiring as a Bull. And he had a lot of great memories. Bulls fans loved him. Knicks fans, not so much, probably because they're still paying him.
Yeah, yep, that is one reason I don't really care for Joakim Noah as a New York Knick. But let's focus on the positives for a minute. Obviously, was a very great defensive player for the Bulls for several years. I believe he won a Defensive Player of the Year award and was an All-Star at the peak of his career. I mean, he really did impact that peak Bulls team in the early 2010s with Derrick Rose, with Luol Deng. He had a very, very good NBA career, although he was shitty with the Knicks. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but it makes a lot of sense to me. He's going to retire with the Bulls, and congrats to him on a great career.
And it's sad because he had one of the strangest shots you've ever seen. He had the two-handed thing. He went up there at the free throw line, looked like a complete idiot. But, hey, I don't know if it worked or not for him because he didn't score a lot. But as you said, a great defensive player, brought a lot to the team and to the locker room. More news, the Washington football team has parted ways with Alex Smith. He had an incredible story, of course, coming back from the injury and a freak injury that almost lost his leg. And that 30 for 30 documentary was just crazy about him on ESPN. And now here he is, a free agent, and he won a lot of games for the football team.
He did. A lot of games in the NFC East. I don't know if that's fair. He
was their most successful quarterback.
There we go. Yeah, that makes more sense. I got to give him a big salute. I mean, I know we talked about that a little bit a few episodes back with the whole controversy of who made the playoffs. But I still stand by. Truly happy for Smith. Great to see him come back from what turned out to be a life-threatening injury, lead his team to the playoffs. I'm not sure what this is going to end up meaning for him in terms of, is he going to latch on with another team or is he going to step away? But he is an absolute warrior. Don't forget, first overall pick. He wasn't very good in San Francisco to start, but he kept battling, got better, turned into a very, very useful quarterback for them. And then the Chiefs before Mahomes came in, and then for Washington. So you got to give him credit. He's been a very solid quarterback, and whatever happens to him, I wish him the best.
Of course, and I saw a thing from Bucky Brooks. Also, Matt Miller talked about this earlier as well. The Jaguars being a potential spot for him to back up Trevor Lawrence. Of course, the Utah connection with Urban Meyer, and of course, the GM Trent Baalke was in San Francisco when he was there. A lot of familiarity there, and I think it couldn't hurt the young kid to learn something from Alex Smith. I think that'd be a good spot for him. Anyways, we're going to Obi Toppin. He is in the dunk contest. That's the final news thing that we have here. And I think it's going to be a little Obi lobbing coming up for the Toppin dunk contest.
Yeah, I do think Toppin will be fun to watch in the dunk contest. We've seen him have a lot of success in Dayton. That's the most electrifying part of his game. I got to say, though, this is going to lead into the poll question. I feel like the All-Star game and dunk contest festivities in general from the NBA are really, really stupid and unnecessary.
Yeah, it's definitely caused some controversy throughout the league, and a lot of people have been talking about it. But that is going to be our poll question. Check it out on Twitter at the Big City Sports PD. Comes out every Tuesday. It says, should the NBA be having the All-Star weekend? And as simple as that, just a yes or no sort of thing. Get your opinion on it. And that's going to lead us into our first topic of discussion of the day, the New York Knicks. And talking about All-Star weekend, they have Julius Randle, who is heading to the All-Star game. Also, Zach LaVine of the Bulls. We'll get into him a little bit later. But Julius Randle having a fantastic year. But this Knicks team has played a great basketball right now. I believe they're stuck in fourth place in the Eastern Conference, which is very tight felt. But I think Tom Thibodeau could be deserving of honors to become maybe Coach of the Year, at least somewhere in there.
Well, right now he definitely belongs in that discussion, and I'm trying to remember. I mean, the Eastern Conference is so volatile and competitive that this could change at any moment. But I got to be excited for just a minute. Look, at the time of this recording, the New York Knicks have a winning record 35 games into a season, which hasn't happened since 2013, which is the last time the Knicks made the playoffs with that Carmelo, Amari Stoudemire, Tyson Chandler team. It's been a long road just to be mediocre for the Knicks. And at the end of the day, that's what their record says they are. But it definitely feels a lot better than being mediocre. Knicks have won 3 straight games at the time of this recording on Monday night, have 2 games left before the All-Star break. So if they win one of those, they'll go into the break with a winning record. I think that would be a great accomplishment for the first half of the season. We'll see what happens with their last 2 games. But Randall has been fantastic all season. That's been consistent. He's been a well-rounded player who's played well on both ends of the court. Has slid over to the 5 a little bit more recently with Mitchell Robinson out, but he has just been efficient, well-rounded, fun to watch, and well-deserving of that All-Star bid.
And I think it speaks to the depth of this team because you mentioned Mitchell Robinson has not been there. And you look, not only have they won 3 in a row, they've won 4 out of their last 5. This momentum starting to build from this Knicks team. And you love to see it because, like you said, first time since 2013 being over 500. I know you enjoyed the Melo days because you're a Syracuse guy. And he obviously brought a lot to that team. But I think the direction the Knicks are going right now is just nice. And I have one question for you. Do you think the All-Star game could hinder some of this momentum, or do you think that do you think that they could pick right back up where it left off?
Honestly, I think it's going to depend more on the schedule than anything else. I'm not too worried about it. The Knicks are unlikely to go on a winning streak of too many games. They do still have some limitations offensively in terms of their shooting and not having consistent scorers outside of Randall. So I'm not anticipating they rattle off 7, 8, 9 wins at any point. But I don't even mean that as a criticism. So I think the Knicks will overall, as of right now, at least be a relatively consistent team that can hopefully win a little bit more than it loses. But I don't see them all of a sudden being an upper echelon Eastern Conference team. Nothing like that. They've played a few weeks of decent basketball that try to not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I completely understand. It's nice. Actually been a little bit fun to be a Knicks fan in recent weeks for a change. It really hasn't been for a long time. And it's such a massive fan base in the biggest city in the country. It's nice to see some positive energy around the Knicks for once. And with Robinson out, out, I do want to also single out Nerlens Noel, who has been fantastic in his place, especially on the defensive end, blocking shots. He's fifth in the league in blocks per game. And the Knicks' last two games before recording here, a back-to-back against the Pacers and the Pistons, where Taj Gibson also sprained his ankle and didn't play. Noel played more than 40 minutes in both games and was outstanding.
Yeah, I like what I've seen out of Noel, and I wanted the Bulls to get him. I said it. Go back and check the record. I said Bulls, go get him. But because now you see Daniel Gafford get the healthy scratch, we'll get into that. But I mean, I love what I've seen out of Nerlens Noel, especially when Robinson went down. He's really just picked up where Robinson left off, and he's done a lot of things well. And then you saw Randall slide down to the 5 a couple times, and Taj, even when he's healthy, I think he's a nice addition to the team, brings a lot to the locker room, has only started a handful of games, if that. But I think this team is finally gelling, and it's interesting because you see the Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson under Thibs, and they're bringing that same leadership to this team, all three of them, similar to how they did it in Chicago. So as to sit back as like as a former, I don't know if I'd say former, but a Bulls fan growing up in the 2010 era of watching Bulls basketball, to see that those fingerprints on this young roster, it's definitely a fun sight to see.
Yeah, seeing these guys, all that were associated with the Bulls at the peak of their respective careers, now with the Knicks 10 years later and having some limited success as well. It is a nice building block, hopefully. If the Knicks are able to win another 15 to 20 games, they have a very legitimate shot at being at the very least in the play-in tournament, if not just a playoff team. And I did not think the Knicks had any chance at that at the beginning of this season, even though I overall liked what they did in the offseason more than I usually do. I still did not foresee them being this competitive and actually being a winning record team halfway through the year. So it is nice to see that. I'm still waiting to see. I'm still hoping that the other shoe doesn't drop at some point and that all of this doesn't just go out the window. But for now, I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I do want to point out also that during the 3-game winning streak, Elfrid Payton has missed those 3 games. Derrick Rose has been in the starting lineup. He's played well, and all of those Bulls guys that you mentioned are bringing that defensive intensity to the Knicks, who are now second in the NBA in defensive rating.
Yeah, he's this has been a great thing with the defense. You mean you're getting production from players too. I mean, like you said, the injuries have happened to this team. There's been a lot of shuffling around, and the depth's been tested. But one thing that hasn't faltered, even when the depth has come in, is the way that they communicate on defense. I think it's goes back to like the college coaching where communication's key and knowing where someone's going to be at all times. I think that's just so important, and it's pivotal. And it doesn't matter whether who's taking the floor. If you can have that sort of communication with random people thrown in at different spots throughout the game, it can only enhance your defensive intensity and the team's success as a whole.
I hope it continues. One thing that I do have to point out that there's definitely a mathematical clarity that this could change at some point is despite the fact that the Knicks are giving up a pretty solid number of 3-point attempts, the opponent 3-point field goal percentage is dead last against them, which is great. I still have some doubts that that's going to keep up forever. If they start to give up a little bit more of those shots, they'll regress to a more middle of the pack to slightly above average defense. And considering the Knicks' offensive limitations, that could definitely be a big factor. But considering all the effort and dedication the Knicks have clearly shown on the defensive end, they are a very tough team to play as an offense against. Despite the fact that teams are eventually going to generate some open looks, because they've had to work so hard throughout the game to put points on the board, can help prevent some of those shots from going in, I'd say, because it keeps these other teams out of their rhythm, out of their flow. If that continues, I think the Knicks are going to be able to sustain this to an extent. But if not, then we could see a little bit of a regression later in the season.
Yeah, we could. And we're going to switch over real quick to the Brooklyn Nets. And the Brooklyn Nets, they have been playing great basketball. They sit at 22-13, I believe is their record right now. And they're finally picking it to get 23-13 with the win, of course, tonight. Like Slick said at the time we're recording, which is Tuesday morning at 1 a.m. But anyway, the Knicks, they're playing well. I mean, they're getting production out of the big players, which is huge. The thing coming into the season for me was, can these players stay healthy? And so far they have. Durant's looked good. Irving's looked good when he arrived. But even Harden, when he came in, he's looked good. And Jeff Green, a little bit of an injury issue where he wasn't in the lineup. But I think this team's finally putting it together, and it's going to be scary going down the stretch.
The Nets are surging right now. I mean, there's no reason to dance around it. When Harden first came in, while they won a couple of games, the defensive issues I think were legitimate at the time. The defense has definitely been better for the Nets since then. They had won 8 games in a row. They lost one to the Mavericks with both Irving and Durant missing that game. But then they won tonight against the Spurs. We talked about this at the beginning, kind of surviving a crazy ending to that game. The Nets gave up 10 straight points to allow the Spurs to force overtime, a wild sequence where Murray hit a shot to force it, but held on. Harden has been consistent since he's come to the team, and he's been healthy and in the lineup, has had a few triple doubles. Kyrie Irving has been in the lineup and playing incredibly good basketball, efficient basketball for a great shooting team that is winning 9 out of 10, despite the fact that Kevin Durant has missed 8 straight games.
I like that you brought up that the defense was lacking when they first got there. They brought in Andre Robertson, and he was someone that cannot shoot. He cannot shoot he couldn't shoot anything. Like he was one of the worst shooters in NBA history. But he still finds a way to bring that added defensive factor to a team that really doesn't have any defense. So I think having him there, they're finally putting it together with him, and having him come in. I think he's played in 3 games so far this season, and I think that's a great addition for a team that needed some sort of defensive life, and I think he brings that to their roster.
He's definitely somebody who can help around the edges. I don't think he's going to end up playing big minutes. He played a little bit in garbage time against the Mavericks because that game was pretty one-sided. But I do think his defensive influence behind the scenes is going to help a little bit. But I think more importantly, the Nets have just had some time to redevelop that team chemistry with integrating James Harden into the team, had a little bit more time to play together, learn each other's tendencies, strengths and weaknesses, etc. And they're starting to gel a little bit. And the fact that they've been so lights out on the other end of the court also kind of takes some of the pressure off. And there is one note here that I wanted to point out. We've talked about how much the Nets are valuing shooting. They have, as of right now, 6 players on the team who are shooting at least 40% from 3. You know, the big 3 of Durant, Irving, and Harden you might expect. Joe Harris, you could probably guess as well. He is one of the others. But the others are Jeff Green, who's played very well for the Nets, and Tyler Johnson, actually, kind of a forgotten man, but he's played some solid minutes over the years for teams like the Heat. And all of those shooters just make them impossible to play defense against.
Yeah, and Tyler Johnson averaging 13 minutes a night. I mean, this is huge for the time he's been there. Like you said, the former Heat player, and this is crazy how they're all shooting. Like, it's crazy because usually when you see it, there's a few people that can shoot the 3, but when you have a lot of people that can do it, it only brings more to your team. And I think I like what I've seen out of this Nets team, and I'm going to go out on a limb. I think that they're going to be in the NBA Finals. I mean, I don't know if that's so much as a limb now that you've seen the success and it's sort of like I'm jumping on it now, but I've loved what I've seen out of this team. I harped on the general manager. I harped on the front office for moving someone like, who was it, Jared Allen, their big center, could have been a cornerstone to that team for future years. They decided to part ways, go after, bring in, and win right now. And I like the aggressiveness, but it was scary at the time. But right now, it seems like peaches. Seems like peaches right now.
I mean, it also, we kind of saw the writing on the wall for Harden and the Nets eventually coming. And right now, they're a second in the Eastern Conference, only half a game behind the Sixers in first. The Sixers are looking pretty good this year as well. And if those two teams stay healthy and end up on a collision course in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that would be a great series. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. If the Nets are able to stay healthy enough and get enough games with their big 3, I think they are the team to beat in the East. Obviously, long way to go. But definitely things are looking up for them as we head into the All-Star break, and they are clearly one of the contending teams at the very least in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and like you said about the 76ers, I mean, Joel Embiid's having an MVP caliber season. I think it's him and Jokic are the 2 that I would think are the main front runners for that MVP award. And The 76ers are really, really good. And Ben Simmons, of course, the unique point guard that doesn't shoot, but does a lot of other things. And that brings a lot to their team. But it's going to be interesting, like you said, if they meet up in the finals. That's good, or not the finals, but the Eastern Conference Finals, just in the playoffs in general. If they meet up in the playoffs, it would be a good game for sure. But
No, I would definitely look forward to and watch that entire series, unless, of course, they play on the same night as the Knicks, because I still have priorities here. But no, the Nets have been playing fantastic basketball. Durant has missed 8 straight games, and they've still won 7 of the 8. And I think they can only get better. I mean, their ceiling is really, really high. And as much as the shooters are doing well for them overall, imagine if Landry Shamet starts to hit his stride, because he hasn't had a great start for the Nets, but he's also a very capable shooter. And then he would just add yet another dimension. And I am curious to see if the Nets make any minor moves around the edges before the trade deadline. But overall, the core of this team is set.
yeah, the core is set on this team, and you talk about the Knicks playing on the same night. Maybe the Knicks will go on a little run in the playoffs. It's something you haven't seen in a while, even making the playoffs. But that would be
I've seen
interesting.
one playoff series win in my life, so I would argue I've never seen a playoff series run at all.
That's true. Maybe it'll happen this year. You never know. See if Thibodeau's strategy can buy in for the rest of the season. Anyways, let's get into Thibodeau's old team, the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are coming up, and we have a lot to talk about them, or at least somewhat talk about them. Of course, they're coming off the loss to Denver, the 118-112 bout that ended poorly for the Chicago team. And let's talk about Zach LaVine real quick, because my friend Abe told me that he's going to have an MVP caliber season at the beginning of the year. And I was like, really? And then he's like, look at the numbers ever since his ACL. He's only gotten progressively better. And I was like, okay, there's an argument to be made there. But then you look at it as a whole, like, oh, wow, this dude's playing ball. He has people around him, and he's really developed into a leader on that team. And I think that's huge. And to have a head coach like Billy Donovan there to help guide him and help him be a leader with that core, that's going to be huge for their future, especially down the line. But even this year, to where he's been having a breakout year, I think it only helps.
LaVine, like Julius Randle, is a well-deserved all-star in my opinion. He's just been more and more efficient as a shooter. We know how talented he's always been offensively and how athletic he is. And we've seen him in the dunk contest before a couple of times. So I mean, we all know what he's capable of on that end. But he also had the reputation as kind of the volume shooter who can't play defense, kind of like a Jamal Crawford type. And I'm not saying that he didn't have a fantastic NBA career, but he had some limitations, right? It to me kind of seemed like Zach LaVine was in a similar ilk or a similar build kind of career arc was on its way. But we really have seen him turn the corner a little bit this season. He's been ultra efficient, really elevating his game and elevating the players around him with his passing ability, which Randall also has done, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that in the Knicks segment. And the all-star bid to me is well deserved. He has been the centerpiece of this Bulls team that's playing competitive basketball.
They are. And like I said, about last week or 2 weeks ago, I said that they can't seem to get any momentum. It's like they win one, then they lose one. They win one, they lose one. They finally lost 2 in a row. And I think it's good for them even to lose some of these games, because you want to see them fight back and bring back and see if they can regroup, or if they put their heads down. I think with Boylan, there's a 100% chance the heads are down, and they're not excited to go out and play. But I think right now, I think that they're like, okay, let's go back out. We have more games on the schedule. There's a lot of good things happening for us, and let's go for it. And I think the offensive efficiency this year has been key. Of course, we mentioned Thaddeus Young before. He's helped out for that. But you talk about Kobe White. He's someone that hasn't been able to facilitate. He's gotten a little bit better at that, but he's a shooting point guard, and he does a good job at doing that. A little bit of inconsistency, though.
White's definitely stronger as an off-ball guard. We know his scoring ability, no doubt. But in terms of the Bulls recently as a team, they have lost 2 in a row, including the game tonight. But despite the fact, I mean, they're one game behind the Knicks in the standings right now in the loss column, right? Knicks have 17 losses, Bulls have 18 at the time of recording. And the Eastern Conference is so weird and screwy this year that the Knicks are 4th in the East and the Bulls are 10th right now, tied with the Pacers. It shows how competitive and how many teams are in between. The Bulls tonight, from what I've seen, Nikola Jokic, who we're talking about MVP candidates a minute ago, he absolutely went off. I mean, he double fisted the Bulls like beers at a frat house. At 39 points, 14 rebounds, 9 assists. He just missed a triple double. I mean, he made Wendell Carter his bitch on several occasions on both ends of the court. I mean, he was fantastic. And while we definitely can highlight the Bulls have been fantastic and efficient for the most part on the offensive end of the court, their defense, especially on the interior, has definitely left a lot to be desired.
Wendell did get cooked. I mean, let's be honest. Jokic, I talked about earlier, like a couple minutes ago, that he's an MVP caliber player right now this season, and he's in the front runner. And him and Embiid have looked good. But like you said, this defense has been bad, and I think that goes into Daniel Gafford's benching, where he didn't play well on the defensive side, and they elected to go with Cornette, who I don't think is a bigger upgrade defensively, but there's not too much there. But this defense of this Bulls team is not good, and they need to find a way to get some reinforcements or find a different strategy that can stop the basketball.
I am curious to see what the Bulls do at the trade deadline, but yeah, I mean, Knicks legend Luke Cornett got some minutes tonight,
Oh,
but he is not a defensive savior either, not by any stretch of the imagination. We've seen the Bulls get a little bit more creative recently. Garrett Temple started tonight, and the Bulls had a 3-guard lineup with him, Zach LaVine, Kobe White, and then having Wendell Carter and I put this down here somewhere. I'm going to look, and Patrick Williams as the starting 5 tonight. So I just want to make sure I had that right there. And I think that's a creative solution. We've seen Thaddeus Young kind of have a renaissance year this year. He's been solid throughout his career, but playing the small ball 5, but that does have some limitations defensively. I think that is going to be a problem to an extent for the Bulls all season. I don't think that's the strength of their team, whether they're fully healthy with Lauri Markkanen on the court. I wouldn't call him an above average or elite defensive player. So unless they make a major unexpected move at the trade deadline for an Andre Drummond type, I don't see the interior defense improving drastically within this season.
yeah, that's true. I don't think there's going to be too much of an upgrade there. It's just I I saw a report today, and it said it was Arturas Karnisovas coming out, and he said that he's not trading anybody. That's basically what he was getting at, is he's staying put. They're going to try to make the playoffs with this roster. And I don't understand that philosophy. I like the buy or sell thing, because if you're not doing either, then you're staying lateral. And if you miss the playoffs, then you didn't do anything. You had an opportunity to trade a Thaddeus Young who could have warranted you some sort of return like Marcus Morris did of the New York Knicks. But I think it's interesting that he wants to keep everyone together and see if they can go on this run based on that. And if it does happen, maybe you get them to believe in themselves a little bit more. And I think that's a direction that could be interesting. But I just thought it was odd that he didn't choose one direction to go at.
Well, we could also see him change his mind here before the trade deadline. Obviously, what you say publicly doesn't necessarily mean you're going to follow that later on. Circumstances change. I definitely get what you're getting at. But overall, we also have to consider that even if the Bulls kind of stay put, they have a tough second half schedule looming. There is definitely the possibility that they slip down in the Eastern Conference standings a little bit. And that's not to criticize them, but they could take that relatively passive approach here coming up and then end up falling and ending up with a high lottery pick. I mean, that's more than possible. And not wanting to blow everything up after 40 games, I mean, we can see the effect that can have on a team if they do it year after year. I think it's also possible Karnisovas and Billy Donovan want to get a better look at some of the guys on the team right now and say which of these veterans do we think can be useful going forward, or which ones do we think we can show the door. So I think it's more just they're still getting it settled into their roles. It's a very evolving roster with a lot of options and possibilities. I think the Bulls for now are just keeping their possibilities open.
And that's a good point. I think that's what they should do. I mean, obviously I'd like to see them pick one or the other, but I liked your point on if it still gives them that experience to see which one wants to stick around. So I guess there is a long-term goal in the future that's they're trying to get at. But anyway, we're going to get into some hockey stuff, and the first thing on the agenda is the Artemi Panarin story/news. Swig, what do you want to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I know that news had broken when we recorded the last episode, but we didn't have a great place to fit it in with the football heavy episode. So I do want to make a quick statement on that. It's the only thing we're going to mention with the Rangers today. We'll get into the how they've been doing on the ice more coming up here in the next couple weeks. But yeah, a very, very bizarre, wild situation with Artemi Panarin, the Rangers' best player. He's taken a leave of absence from the team. We'll see how long that ends up lasting. But as of this recording, he has not come back because he has been a very outspoken vocal critic of Vladimir Putin in his native Russia. He's made some social media posts and public comments, and again, I think that's perfectly fine. That's up to him. Players should be able to have voice their concerns. They have the platform to do so, right? So no problems there in terms of he can support whoever he wants. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert on Russian politics, but it is definitely we have seen some let's say dangerous situations with the Russian government in the past, and I'm not going to get too into specific examples, but Panarin, in addition to being critical of Vladimir Putin, has been supportive of one of his opposing political figures named Alexei Navalny, who was actually poisoned not too long ago and is currently sitting in prison. And a bit of a sketchy situation there, to say the least. And after he made his latest social media post, but when Panarin still played in the KHL in Russia, which is Russia's top league before he moved to North America, one of his former KHL coaches, a guy named Andrei Nazarov, came out with these allegations that Panarin physically assaulted an 18-year-old girl in Latvia in 2011, which are obviously very important, very disturbing allegations. Now, I want to make sure I make this clear. If that is true, that is absolutely vile and disgusting and completely unacceptable. But from what I understand of the situation, from what I understand regarding Nazarov in particular, it seems to be a fabricated politically motivated set of allegations. And I hope that that is true. None of his teammates in the KHL from back then were able to confirm that story. There's no police report in Latvia. The Rangers came out with a statement saying it was fabricated and they're supporting Panarin. And as of now, so do I. I have no reason not to, innocent until proven guilty kind of thing. You got to calm down a little bit. But a very, very wild, shitty, disturbing situation all around. I sincerely hope those allegations are not true, ignoring the on ice impact that Panarin has. And hopefully that he and his family, who's most of whom are still in Russia, are safe and he can come back to the team soon.
Yeah, that's well put. Definitely a weird story there, but something that we need to bring up because Panarin, his impact on the ice is just huge for this Rangers team, and I think this team has seen that with his absence. And I think obviously we want to make sure that everything's good where he's at and everyone stays fine. And hopefully these reports are false because that, like you said, it'd be very vile. But anyway, it's an interesting bit there
Disturbing for
yeah,
sure.
disturbing bit for sure about Panarin. But anyway, that's going to wrap up that. We just wanted to break that news out and explain the story to everybody covering that. But other than that, let's get into the New York Islanders. The Islanders, they're a big hockey team, and they've been playing some interesting hockey as of late. What's one thing that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, they've been playing some solid hockey overall. We have seen a lot of what we've expected in terms of mostly a solid defensive team without a ton of offense. We've hit on that before. But one thing that did stand out to me, one of the Islanders' most recent games where they beat the Bruins, that game was tied at 2 after the second period, and the Islanders' offense exploded, scoring 5 goals in the third, winning that game 7-2. And in their most recent game, that was last night before we recorded. Ilya Sorokin had a 2-0 shutout win over the Penguins. I think things are definitely looking up for the most part for the Islanders, who at the time of this recording are 11-6-4.
Yeah, 11-6-4, and they were a team that was in the in almost in the Stanley Cup, and they were right there on the edge. And this Barry Trotz system is really something to watch because it can be very frustrating. The defensive structure. I mean, if you're introducing hockey to someone and you're like, okay, pick a team that I would fall in love with right away. The Islanders, although they're good, they have to be last on that list because a hockey fan is just going to be like, wait, they're just dancing in the middle of the ice the whole time. What are they doing here? So I think it'd be very frustrating for a young hockey player or fan to just finally get into the game for the first time and watch Islanders, because it's definitely interesting. But if they're more of a defensive minded person, then maybe they might enjoy it. But it's definitely interesting how he runs things there in New York.
Well, the Islanders definitely have the boring allegations. I mean, they're last on my list because I hate the goddamn Islanders. We know that, but I'm not biased at all when I say that as a New York Rangers fan. But while the Islanders might have the accusations of not being the most exciting team to watch, I guarantee you, no Islanders fan cares, and they shouldn't. There's no reason to. They've been I would say top tier NHL team for the last couple of seasons. They've been getting better and better this season. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And the strength of their team is their ability to suppress other teams' offenses. And in a division that has Panarin when he's playing, a division that has Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Jack Eichel and Marchand and Bergeron this year, and Alex Ovechkin, among others, the fact that the Islanders are better than any other team in the division at limiting their success is absolutely crucial to their success as a team. And we have seen that formula work very well over the last two seasons. I do want to focus on them defensively here first. I got to give their top defensive pair of Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock a ton of praise. They have been fantastic, complementing each other very well all season. Pelech is more of the stay-at-home, shutdown kind of defenseman, and Pulock is more of a two-way guy, but they have been outstanding all season on the Islanders' top pair. The bottom two pairs have been a little bit more concerning. The loss of Devon Toews has definitely manifested a little bit, and that second pair has been mostly Nick Leddy and Scott Mayfield, and we have seen some defensive communication breakdowns there. It's something I do think can be corrected, but I think it is an area of concern.
I like that you brought up Pulak. He's got a +7 rating, and as a defenseman, that's nice. I mean, you're on the ice a lot, and to have a rating like that, that top pair has been really good for them. But I want to talk about their offense real quick. And one name, of course, the big name that everyone knows is Matt Barzell. And one thing I found interesting, he leads the team in penalty minutes with 30. So he's not only putting the puck in the back of the net and leading the team in points, but he's also doing it with penalty minutes, sort of like Gordie Howe style.
Yeah, or goon. He's putting himself in the sin bin or penalty box, whatever you want to call it. And now he would have an argument about the boring or not exciting team to watch because he has some dirty dangles. He is an elite offensive player, but he is kind of the exception to the rule offensively for the Islanders. There is another thing I wanted to bring up, or I guess two things that kind of tie into each other. When we did our hockey preview episode, I mentioned being excited about a line for the Islanders where John Gabriel Pageau, who has been very good, was going to center two young rookie wings in Kiefer Bellows and Oliver Wahlstrom, who are two recent first-round picks of the Islanders. Oliver Wahlstrom has really solidified himself as a top 9 NHL forward, and he has had a massive impact on their power play. Which has been much better this season after really, really struggling the last couple of years. So, Wahlstrom is going to stay on that line, even though Anthony Beauvillier has come back from injury here recently. But the other side of that line, Kiefer Bellows, he has not had that same success, unfortunately, for the Islanders. He played a few pretty average games at the beginning of the season, and then has, I believe, only played once in the last month or so, has been on the taxi squad, shuttled back and forth ever since. And he has really looked lost in the defensive zone, and especially on a Barry Trotz Islanders coach team, it's going to be really hard for him to crack the lineup at this current rate. I do hope for his development's sake that he is able to get a little bit more comfortable with that, because I still think that line with Pageau centering two young, exciting wingers could be really fun to watch. But at least at the beginning of the season, Wahlstrom has really taken his opportunity and run with it. Unfortunately, not so much for Kiefer Bellows.
Yeah, for Kiefer Bellows, he's got the Paul Bichonette hat trick and sitting up there in the press box 3 times in a row. So kudos to him for doing that.
I mean, Spittin' Chicklets.
Yeah, straight out of Spittin' Chicklets. Got to quote that. Pink Whitney, Ryan Whitney, all that stuff they got going on there.
Bottle, I got some in the car.
But yeah, this Islanders team's interesting. They play an interesting style. They're winning hockey games, so that's huge. But the thing that makes it so interesting is we talked in the offseason that their cap space was nothing. They had no room to work from. And they did all that they could to bring back Matt Barzal, which was huge because he's, like I said, leads their team in points and also surprisingly penalty minutes. But I think it's huge because they're putting it together with what they had, and you're still seeing Cal Clutterbuck, Matt Martin on like these third to top lines that you're like, what the heck are they doing out here? Like they'd probably be a fourth line duster on some of these other teams, but they're finally somehow contributing to this hockey team that has 11 wins right now. It's so crazy.
They are some physical players. We could make that argument for guys like Casey Cizikas as well, and he's added a little bit of offense to his game. The Islanders, that's why I still feel like their ceiling is still a little bit limited, as they have so many guys who frankly might not be NHL quality forwards in terms of skill, taking up so many lineup spots, but they are also able to maximize the defensive abilities of the team. In terms of their limited financial resources, I do think that's going to keep them from making any big splashes at the trade deadline unless they are able to unload at least one of their contracts. One of the guys we mentioned, maybe a Leo Komarov, somebody like that, where if they're able to get rid of one of those contracts, they might be able to bring somebody in, but I don't think they're going to be big players for any big stars at the deadline. They might be able to bring in a Taylor Hall type next season if they free up a little bit of flexibility, because he only signed that 1-year deal with the Sabres. But for the time being, we're mostly seeing what the Islanders are going to be throughout the season, assuming they stay mostly healthy. I don't think this roster is going to change too much between now and a possible playoff appearance.
And last note here on the Islanders, their goaltending has been fantastic. Both of them, Sorokin and Varlamov, have been phenomenal. I mean, Varlamov's having an insane season with a 2.15 goals against average, and right behind him, actually he was 2.17. 2.19 is Ilya Sorokin, the rookie. So a lot of great goaltending there at the goals against average for them, and it's got to be nice playing behind that defense. So.
No doubt, but you got to give him credit. I mean, Varlamov in particular, I'd say was, decent but not great for the Islanders last season. And Sorokin, while very talented, was unproven. Yeah, obviously still a small sample size for him, but it's definitely been way more positive than negative for both of them, and they deserve a lot of credit.
And finally, we're going to wrap it up with the Chicago Blackhawks. And this Hawks team, they're somehow this team is winning games. And I think it's time that we start taking them serious. But with that being said, I'm going to say something that absolutely counters that point. And it's the last two games this Hawks team has played, both against Detroit. Okay, now Detroit, a bottom of the barrel team. Let's be honest here, not one of the best. They have a few bright stars with Larkin and some of their younger players with Mantha and stuff. But anyway, you look at this. You look at the Blackhawks. They gave up 40 plus shots on back-to-back nights for the first time ever, or the first time this season in back-to-back nights that they've given up 40 plus shots. And one thing that's been working for them is their defense so far up until those last two games. The defensive structure is somehow been nice. I think Jeremy Colleton has finally deserved a lot of credit with what he's been doing there. And the forward score, it's simple as that. They have a lot of scoring on the team, but the defense the last two games has looked horrible. Adam Boqvist came back. He's contributed to a little bit of that defensive struggles, and they set down Nick Beaudin, who was one of their best defensive players, at least the brightest young defensive players that they've had. They just sent him down to Rockford, and now Belquist is back in the lineup, and we're seeing the same exact thing that we saw last year with the 40 plus shots.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a discouraging trend. I mean, every logical thing says the Blackhawks shouldn't be this good right now, but screw it, I give up. They're in a similar position record-wise to the Islanders as of the time of this recording. They're 12-7-4, and their offense has been outstanding. I mean, I think that is definitely sustainable. I'll start with that really quick. Patrick Kane has been absolutely fantastic. He has been consistent, and that top line with him and Alex DeBrincat, who's really elevated his game to another level this year. Pia Suter's been elevated to the top line already after coming over from Switzerland. I think that's a really encouraging sign, and they have played damn good hockey for the Blackhawks. But I do still think defensively there's got to be some regression at some point. They have been a lot better than expected. I think part of that is because the Blackhawks goaltending situation has been so much better than we anticipated as well. Lankinen has been a solid, steady presence presence. And I think Malcolm Subban deserves some credit as well in his backup duty. He's been a lot better than I think both of us kind of expected him to be a liability, but he's played solid hockey. He's controlled rebounds, but while the Blackhawks offense is legit, that division, they absolutely, I think, could be a playoff team now. I give up. Logic's out the window. They've exceeded expectations in the early going. The defense, it does leave me some room for concern, because giving up 40 plus to Detroit in 2 straight games is not a great sign.
It's not. And Detroit came in 0 for 38 on the power play. They gave up a power play goal against them. That's like a solid month of not scoring a power play goal. And
but they got to score eventually.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, they had to score eventually, but you could tell that game that Subban started the first game against Detroit the past few weeks or last week, where he did enough. Like you said, like I said, he's faced 40 freaking shots, 40 plus shots, and the defense in front of him was awful. But to your point on that top line, Pius Suter has been phenomenal. He could be in the Calder conversation for Rookie of the Year. He's looked really good. And then one thing that's really stood out to me is Dylan Strome has missed these past few games, and it doesn't matter. We talked about how the center depth was huge coming into the season and how it might be tested with Doc and Taves out. Now you're losing Strome. It doesn't matter. Pius Suter's on the top line. Soderberg's doing something. You have Camp. You have Walmark. I mean, you're just throwing everybody in there, and they're still getting the production. But it's definitely interesting with the names that just cycle in, and then the production's there.
Screw it, man. Next man up. And the Blackhawks have embodied that mentality better than anybody else. It's weird. In the 2 Detroit games, I thought overall they played a decent game in the 5-3 loss and didn't play all that well when they won a game 7-2. So you never really know. The Blackhawks definitely loosened up. And I do want to give a quick shout out. In that 7-2 win, Patrick Kane scored his 400th career goal, another in a set of many milestones in what should be a Hall of Fame career. He's only 32 years old, so he has the time to get more. But I definitely want to give him a quick shout out. He has been fantastic. He's got 34 points already this season and hit another milestone on their last game.
He did. That's definitely a great storyline, and something that he's done a lot of in his career is just contribute offensively. And my favorite part of that game was towards the end, Thomas Greiss, the goalie, he snapped his stick on the post after giving up another one. And after it snapped, he took the middle part and tried to snap the other thing on the top of the thing, and it didn't break. So he just threw it over to the side with this other stick, and it was amazing. It was a goalie meltdown, and I was like, "We're getting to him. We're getting to him."
I got a couple stories on a goalie meltdown here, really quick here before we sign off. But 2 that I want to bring up. One was with the Calgary Flames. I watched a game where David Riddick got pulled in a 6-1 loss to the Senators, and he bashed his head in the tunnel. Like, he had his helmet still on, but he just bashed his head into the wall after he got pulled, which was pretty funny to see. I mean, it seemed to be a door rather than brick wall, but still, don't see that every day. And the other one was in a game, I think 2 nights ago, maybe last night, with the Blues and the Sharks, and Jordan Binnington got pulled.
That's right.
Yeah, he got pulled for the Blues, and got in that quick little scuffle with Dubnyk on his way out. And why did the refs have to break up a goalie fight? Come on, man.
Did you see the goalie fight in Wheeling?
Yes, I did.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
Oh, I think I have like a Google alert for all goalie fights.
Anyway, getting back real quick to the Hawks' last parting words. I think Stan Bowman deserves a ton of credit, and I've ripped him a ton on this show. Finding Philip Kurashev, he's been phenomenal. The right wing on the Hawks, he's putting the puck in the back of the net, doing a lot of things well. The signing of Matthias Janmark, seeing what he did for Dallas to late in the year, and finding all these gems that a lot of people gave up on. Now, I'm not going to go after the Nikita Zadorov trade, because we knew he was shafted from the start, and we all know that that's still the case. But if you look at everything else he's done, finding the talent of Suter, finding Dominic Kubalik out of nowhere, just finding these guys. I don't know if it's the scouting department or what, but Stan Bowman, he's done a great job of just bringing rookies and players in to fill some of these holes.
He has done some very good things. I do still have some long-term questions, though, as to what the direction of this team is. Now we'll see how if and when Taves comes back and how effective he is. But in terms of while Kane is still great right now, he is on the wrong side of 30. Taves is on the wrong side of 30. Duncan Keith. There are still some questions with those big core guys from the championship teams. They do have some young talent offensively. I mean, no doubt about that. But they still, I think, have some long-term questions on defense. Boquist is a top 10 pick, and the results are mixed on him so far, I'd say. And he's far from the only question mark. I still think the sample size on both goaltenders is small. So, like, I definitely think there's things to praise him for, maybe overreacted a little bit. But I also don't think Blackhawks fans should overreact to a positive start too much and say, oh, well, yeah, Bowman did all these weird and stupid things. Now he's great. You know, we got to temper the expectations a little bit. He has done some good things, but he also has made some missteps. And the direction of the team is still a very important question he needs to answer.
Yeah, it is. And last thing real quick, big road trip coming up for the Hawks, or not road trip, big trip coming up for the Hawks, big stretch of games. They take on Tampa Bay for 3, and that's going to be huge. Remember the last time they got absolutely corkscrewed. But anyway,
Good word.
but you look at the rest of the schedule, they have a lot of the big games are coming up against the teams ahead of them in this division. So big test coming up, and hopefully those defensive struggles the last 2 games were just out of tiredness and just they can find a way to get back to what they're doing early on in the season. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for today. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, basically everywhere. If you're listening on Anchor,
Every platform.
It's every platform. Tell everybody. You get a subscription. You get a just find us there. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you're doing so, and just comment below on Instagram or Twitter, any of our Facebook pages, anything like that. Just come after us and let us know what we're saying wrong, what we're saying right, what you like, what you don't like. And other than that, that's going to wrap it up for today. This is the Big City Sports Podcast for Swig. I'm Dylan Kearns. We will see you next time.